and those of you who are online. We have an incredible panel tonight, incredible topics. So welcome to the debate. Personal prosperity and achieving your dreams. Government programs or free enterprise. This will surely be a lively debate, as there are compelling arguments to be made on both sides. Discussions like this are how we will generate fearless ideas for the grand challenges of our time. There are a few thoughts that I'd like everyone to keep in their mind as we debate how we best unlock opportunities for all Americans to achieve their dreams. First, companies are always looking for ways to get teams to innovate more and find creative answers to problems. Two Maryland Smith researchers have shown that the level of authenticity in a team's climate is key to having an innovative, creative team that discusses problems and brings back solutions. The research found that we must each feel comfortable expressing our authentic feelings, both positive and negative, and as listeners, we must maintain open minds as the discussion proceeds. Second, this is what is known as civil discourse, which is truthful and productive, which is about engaging in meaningful conversations across ideological bounds and demographic divides, and not merely being polite or politically correct. Heated exchanges sometimes occur over issues that leave us feeling disrespected or targeted because our views or affiliations are different from someone else's. Third, and final thought, we may not agree today on everything or arrive at answers or arguments that make sense for everyone. The good news is we don't have to agree with one another. Our responsibility is to raise questions, listen to one another's points of view respectfully, with an open mind, and move toward building a better understanding of the particular problem that we're talking about. As with my President's Distinguished Forum, the hope is that our audience has a meaningful opportunity to investigate today's issues together and explore new and better paths forward. So this is why you are here today, where there are two incredible speakers. It is my pleasure to really just meet them for the first time in my life. I've seen them on television, so I want to thank them for taking time out of their busy schedules to come to Maryland. So now it's my privilege and honor to introduce the Dean of the Smith School, Dean Prabhadev Khonana. Dean Khonana joined Maryland Smith earlier this year, and in his very short time at Smith, I mean, literally, 8 months, led the school to reach a number of goals already, including collaborating with the Honors College on a new interdisciplinary business honors program and the creation of the new Smith Business Leadership Fellows Program for undergraduates at Smith. Just 2 weeks ago, the Smith Advisory Councils for various master's programs were launched, bringing Smith alums and industry executives together to connect with Smith for the benefit of our students. Please join me in welcoming Dean Khonana.
Good evening. Thank you, President Pines, for your very encouraging comments and for leading the University of Maryland to address the grand challenges of our times, bringing extraordinary focus to innovation and entrepreneurship, and to civil discourse for the greater good. I'm pleased this evening to introduce the Snyder Center for Enterprise and Markets and its director, Dr. Ashrie Agarwal. Under the leadership of Dr. Agarwal, the Snyder Center focuses on research and teaching to address the grand challenges of businesses and society in the realm of markets, capitalism, and equitable growth, with a focus on upward mobility. 3 center-affiliated researchers are among the 18 scholars at the Smith School in the top 2% of the most cited scholars in the world and scientists, as well as scientists. The center has championed programs and curricula to bring innovative and entrepreneurial mindsets to the evolution of enterprise and markets, making scholarly research relevant for students, businesses, and the public. The center develops courses that help students understand their individual role in markets, how to lead intentional lives and create careers of their own design. This evening's debate, in collaboration with Steamboat Institute's Campus Liberty Tour, gives us all the opportunity to ponder challenging topics. As President Paynes said earlier, not everyone will agree with every issue, but it is valuable to listen to both sides with respect in order to understand different perspectives so we make things better for all in the future. I'm now pleased to introduce Dr. Ashrie Agarwal, the Rudolph P. Lamont Chair and Professor in Entrepreneurship Strategy, who orchestrates numerous activities in the Snyder Center, along with highly dedicated and passionate staff. You'll see Dr. Agarwal is a bundle of energy. Dr. Agarwal is an accomplished scholar and teacher and believes that truly successful businesses are moral enterprises, resulting from productivity, integrity, and a sense of purpose. She's passionate about upward mobility within and integrating across intellectual, psychological, and economic realms. She is a senior contributor at Forbes and has received numerous awards for her scholarship and mentorship, including the University Scholar Award at the University of Illinois and the Distinguished Scholar Teacher Award at the University of Maryland. Here is Dr. Agarwal.
Good evening. It is great to see the few of you brave ones that have come in person. And it's also great to welcome all of you who are up there online watching us in this debate that is going to be one of the very nice and intense conversations that we hope to have. So, President Paynes, Dean Kanana, thank you so much for your warm words of welcome, and also to remind us as students that the university is truly where we are the marketplace for ideas. And so in that spirit of marketplace for ideas, the Ed Snyder Center has always hosted signature events such as what you're seeing and participating in now, because we believe that rather than providing just one ideological perspective, true conversations happen when we get into reasoned, respectful discourse. And it may very well be that the speakers themselves may not change each other's minds, but to the extent that they have helped you challenge and question your own perspective and open it up, we will have succeeded first and foremost as teachers and instructors for all of you students that are out there. At the Ed Snyder Center, we not only believe in each and every one of you living to your fullest potential by being ethical leaders in whatever domain you choose to be, but to do that through collaboration and trade. And indeed, one of my most dearest collaborations across the years has been with Jennifer Schubert-Aiken, who is the director of the Steamboat Institute and is the one that came up with this great brainchild of having campus liberty tours. In fact, we were the first campus in which the Steamboat Liberty Tour was launched when you had 3 or 4 of these campus tours. And we were very proud to host the first event as well as the second, 2018, 2019. We, of course, couldn't do so in 2020, but here we are in both hybrid formats out here, live and streaming. So without much further ado, let me introduce to you Snyder Center Board of Advisors and Director of the Steamboat Institute, Jennifer Schubert-Aiken.
Well, thanks, Ashrie, and to your president and dean. Such a warm welcome that we always get here on the Maryland campus. So it's really great to be back. We always appreciate having the opportunity to partner with the Ed Snyder Center for Enterprise and Markets. They're so great to work with, so professional, and do everything the right way, and make this a real pleasure. So we do want to again welcome our audience, not only here in College Park, but watching our live stream this evening from locations all over the country. Tonight's debate will ask an important question. What is the best pathway to unlock opportunities for Americans to achieve their dreams? We invite all of our audience members, both here in College Park and watching the live stream, to answer the poll question that you see up here on the screen. You should have received a text. If you're watching online, there's a link where you can respond to the question. You can see the real-time results. These are as people have been voting in the last 10 minutes or so. We are going to ask this question again at the conclusion of the debate to see if opinions have changed. So if you've not yet voted, please vote, and this graphic will be going away in just a bit, and then we'll bring it back at the end. But before we begin this evening's debate, I would like to tell you just a little bit more about Steamboat Institute's Campus Liberty Tour debates. We call it a tour because we typically do each debate in at least 2 locations, sometimes as many as 4. Last night, we hosted this same debate on the campus of the University of Texas at Austin. We got up very early this morning to make sure we would be here on time. You can watch that debate and any of our previous debates on Steamboat Institute's YouTube channel or at steamboatinstitute.org. Some of those previous debates include, earlier this year, we had Jason Riley and Donna Brazil debating social justice and identity politics at CU Boulder. Last year, we had Art Laffer and Leslie Marshall debating the wealth tax and higher income tax rates at Middle Tennessee State University. We previously had Professors Alan Dershowitz and Amy Wax discussing campus free speech at Pepperdine. And of course, 3.5 years ago here in College Park, we had Nigel Farage and Vicente Fox debating nationalism versus globalism. So all of those are on Steamboat Institute's YouTube channel. We're also planning a very ambitious debate schedule for 2022. We, of course, will be talking with Ashrie about being back here next fall. To stay in the know on these debates and what's coming up, please follow Steamboat Institute on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. Get all the latest updates. Since our founding in 2008, the Steamboat Institute has unabashedly promoted 5 core principles. Those principles are limited taxation and fiscal responsibility, limited government, free market capitalism, individual rights and responsibilities, and strong national defense. We also unabashedly promote free speech and robust but civilized debate on all issues. Steamboat Institute's Campus Liberty Tour debates have really gained in popularity since we launched this in early 2018 because of the increasing threat posed by cancel culture. While cancel culture seems to be taking over, Steamboat Institute takes the opposite approach, encouraging free and robust debate on even the most contentious issues. This is how students and all of us develop critical thinking skills and avoid falling into that trap of living in an echo chamber. Without this capacity to engage in civilized debate, how can we expect to maintain our representative democracy? As a 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, Steamboat Institute depends on the generous support of many individuals, businesses, and foundations to bring you these debates, including this evening. So I would just like to very briefly thank the major sponsors of the Campus Liberty Tour: Roger and Sandy Dorff from Dallas, the Sumners Foundation, the Robert and Judy Newman Family Foundation, Cooper Steel in Nashville, the Lynd and Harry Bradley Foundation, the Anschutz Foundation, Jack Roth Charitable Foundation, the Snyder Foundation, David and Nell Box from Georgetown, Texas, and Bud and Kay Isaacs from Denver. I would also like to thank our media partner, Media DC, which owns the Washington Examiner, and Ross Kaminsky, host of the Ross Kaminsky Show on KOA Radio in Denver and iHeartMedia, who've been very helpful in promoting this week's debates. And now, let's get to it. I'd like to introduce our speakers and moderator for this evening. So I'd like to ask them all to just come up and take your seats, and then I will introduce you. Let's give a warm welcome. All right. Charles Payne is host of Making Money with Charles Payne, which is seen weekdays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on the Fox Business Network. Charles is also a contributor to Fox News Channel, frequently appearing on many shows such as Your World with Neil Cavuto, Fox and Friends, and Barney and Company. Charles began his career on Wall Street as an analyst at E.F. Hutton in 1985. In 1991, he founded Wall Street Strategies, an independent stock market research firm where he serves as CEO and principal analyst. Charles published his first book entitled Be Smart, Act Fast, Get Rich in May 2007, and his latest book is Unstoppable Prosperity. Charles attended Minot State College and Central Texas College during his time in the U.S. Air Force. But perhaps his Twitter profile describes him best. Trying to make sense of this world while becoming the man my mother raised, I give a damn, love my family and country, and making people money. Let's give a warm welcome to Charles Payne. Bakari Sellers made history in 2006 when, at just 22 years old, he defeated a 26-year incumbent state representative to become the youngest member of the South Carolina state legislature and the youngest African-American elected official in the nation. Earning his undergraduate degree from Morehouse College and his law degree from the University of South Carolina, Bakari has championed progressive policies to address issues ranging from education and poverty to preventing domestic violence and childhood obesity. Bakari served on President Barack Obama's South Carolina Steering Committee during the 2008 presidential election. He was named to Time Magazine's 40 Under 40 in 2010 and was named to the Root 100 list of the nation's most influential African Americans for 2014 and 2015. Bakari's first book, My Vanishing Country, is a New York Times bestseller. Bakari practices law with the Strom Law Firm in Columbia, South Carolina, and is a political commentator on CNN. Let's give a warm welcome to Bakari Sellers. Moderator this evening is Tom Rogan. He's a commentary editor at the Washington Examiner. Tom has written for many publications, including the Weekly Standard, The Guardian, The Atlantic, The Spectator, USA Today, and The Washington Times, among others. Tom is a frequent contributor on CNN, Fox News, and Real Time with Bill Maher, and was a regular panelist on the McLaughlin Group. Tom is a graduate of King's College London, the School of Oriental and African Studies London, and the College of Law London. Tom was the first recipient of Steamboat Institute's Tony Blankley Fellowship for Public Policy and American Exceptionalism, which we award annually to support and encourage the work of principled young journalists and conservative thought leaders. Let's give a warm welcome to Tom Rogan and our panelists, and I'll let you take it away.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, what?
For 1 second, because I swear to God, I thought Joe Rogan was moderating. I was happy to see you, Tom. I didn't know if I was digging myself a deep hole with this or not.
No relation. Sadly, he has a far greater profile and influence than I do. So we have the introduction. I want to actually do a quick shout out to Mackenzie, one of your fellow students who helped me find this location. Otherwise, I would be lost. But it's great to be here. And so the first thing to point out to all of you before we get started is this fantastic question up above, which you should all vote on it if you feel so inclined. But on that note, I think we will jump right in. Opening statements. Charles, would you like to start us off?
Sure. I've come to this point in life through the journey, my journey, and my ideas on how to be a better person, how to keep this country preeminent, how everyone can participate, primarily comes from my life experiences. I'm an avid reader. I love history, but also living life has been my biggest teacher. I had an intriguing childhood where I grew up initially, the first part of my life on Army bases. My father was in the Army, and it was wonderful. I mean, we moved every year, which I loved. You know, I don't have any childhood friends. I'm a little jealous when someone says, yeah, I know Tommy since the first grade, right? But you know, I was born in New York, went to Pittsburgh, went to Texas, went to Germany, back to Pittsburgh, then Japan, then Texas, then Alabama, North Carolina, then Virginia. And then one day I came home from school when we were in Fort Lee, Virginia. We lived in a 2-story house, beautiful lawn, never worried about crime or any of that stuff. We played all day. It was you know, there was no race or anything. It was just like this amazing, almost a bubble, to be quite frank with you. And my mom said, we're leaving. So all me and my two younger brothers and my mom, all four of us, got on a bus to New York, penniless. We had no money, zero. She had a friend who lived in Harlem, and that's who we went to go stay with. And so we, all four of us, lived in a room in Harlem, which at the time was the most dangerous, poorest neighborhood in America. So I went from this idyllic, amazing, beautiful life where I never thought about money, insecurity, and poverty to one where our first apartment, the first winter in New York, we didn't have heat or hot water for the whole winter. So I was the oldest, and I was sort of thrust in a position of trying to help. And I did everything. First thing I did was I would get paper towels and Windex and clean windows at stoplights, and then get a job at a bodega, whatever. I've always worked since I was 12 years old. And being the oldest, I said, I got to help my family. I've got to figure this out. And eventually I decided, well, like everybody else, you equate money with Wall Street. So I started reading the Wall Street Journal whenever I could. By the way, it was hard as hell. Ever get a chance, look at a 1970s Wall Street Journal. It was nothing but columns and numbers, and it really was tough. But I kind of figured it out. When I was 14, I told my mom I'd work on Wall Street. I bought my first mutual fund when I was 17 years old. She had to co-sign. And my first stock when I was 18, which did extraordinarily well. So I was already hooked, but then I was really hooked. And so, you know, I was able to see all parts of life, and I've been able to grow through that. I was in the Air Force, and I served with different people from different backgrounds. So I just feel, I feel pretty lucky that I've seen it all firsthand. I've lived it all firsthand. I'm not guessing what other people do or think, and I'm not judging, because I think where we are as a nation is the most important thing is we get to know each other better. I don't think we know each other better. Let down some of our guards, because ultimately we all want the same thing. And so that's what I'm here for. And I hope I can kind of share my message with you tonight with that. Thank you.
Very good. Bakari.
So I said this last night, and it bears repeating again. Whenever I travel or whenever I speak, I always find myself to be very, very fortunate, because it got a chuckle last night. I assume it'll get a chuckle today. I'm from the big city of Denmark, South Carolina, where we have a whole 3 stoplights and a blinking light. And so my perspective from rural America is often, it's funny, Tom, when we talk about rural America or urban, we oftentimes use that as coded language. But here I am, a Black guy from rural America, sitting before you today. But the framework, and I appreciate what Charles said, and I appreciate our budding friendship, which is now about 36 hours old here, because he told you from whence he's come. And I would say that my story is decently unique. You heard about the successes I've had electorally, being the youngest state legislator and the youngest Black elected official in the country. But I also remind folk that my life has been bookended by tragedy, whether or not it's 1968. In February of that year, when my father was shot, 28 others were wounded and 3 were killed in what's known as the Orange Massacre. It was the most deadly civil rights demonstration this country's ever seen. It was on the campus of South Carolina State College, as it was known at the time. State troopers fired shots into those group of students. It was the first time that law enforcement were actually charged with federal civil rights crimes for killing unarmed Black folk. They were all found not guilty. I mean, history repeats itself. The only person who was charged, tried, and convicted that night was my father, who was charged, tried, and convicted of rioting. He actually got pardoned in 1990, but refused to take it off of his record. He refused for it to be expunged because he wanted, this country and everyone to understand the injustice that he went through. But then in 2015, when I say bookend, you have a beginning and you have an end. I lost one of my very good friends, Payne, along with 8 others in the Charleston Massacre, where they were going to Bible study, where most Black folk are in the South, on a Wednesday night. They were gunned down simply because of the color of their skin. They were gunned down for no other reason than they were Black folk in a church. And Clem, who's the pastor, let this straggly white boy he never seen before into his church. He went out the way we thought he would, that type of grace. And he was murdered along with 8 others in that church. And so that struggle, along with my father being one of the founding members of SNCC, my legislative service, dealing with a very poor rural community that I've served, it reminds me, and one of the things about Charles and I, Funny enough, I thought about this last night, Charles, when I was watching my Braves kick the ass of the Houston Astros last night. I was thinking about Charles now has a suitcase with wheels on it. And it's funny because Charles wanted to be a lot like his father, and I do as well. And that's kind of unique in what draws us somewhat together on certain issues. But I think back to my father often and understand that he could have lashed out with righteous anger. But instead, he looks at this country a lot like I do, and he believed in what Abraham Lincoln called the better angels of our nature. And so I approach tonight's discussion not thinking anything about this country is irredeemable, but I do think we have to reimagine what she looks like. And I think that the systems that we have in this country, and as we'll get to the first answer to the question, the systems in this country have to be deconstructed. That's the role government plays. And for those of you all who don't believe that we have systemic issues in this country, we'll sit back and relax because we have an hour to talk about it.
Very good. Well, Charles, let's start off with an idea. You both talk very eloquently about your upbringings. This may be an issue for students here. It may not be. You know, one of the advantages I had growing up in the UK, dual citizen, my dad's American, mother's British, is that education there is effectively all public at the college level. Do you think there would be an argument to say that, you know, the Biden administration at the moment, various members of the Progressive Caucus in Congress would say, what's the harm in people who are very successful paying a little bit more tax to pretty dramatically expand the provision of public education at those higher levels? So perhaps kids who don't have the wherewithal that you had, or don't have the confidence, or don't have people like your mother to guide them, can get that little boost to help let them compete with everyone else?
Well, I think first and foremost, we start the conversation off with things like accessible or free college or subsidized college. And I think that's a big mistake because a lot of people who are foisted into college aren't prepared for it. A lot of them don't want to go, even who can pay for it. And unfortunately, if you look at who takes out loans now and don't make it through and really is out without a degree, but still the loans are, you know, a lot of times they're Black and Hispanic and those kind of folks. I think you got to start at the beginning. I think the problem in America, and we discussed this yesterday, but I think it's a really serious problem in so-called blue states and cities, is the weak education that's given to the kids from the very beginning. So that in New York City, a Black kid is reading at about 40% of a white kid and 30% of an Asian kid. So we're going to send this kid now to college. No matter who pays for it, now you're going to say, hey, you're not ready for the rigors of 10th grade, but we're going to put you in college now. And so that's why I think this whole debate is a little specious in the sense that first and foremost, when you subsidize anything, it starts to go crazy. When we took out the middleman during the Obama administration, college debt was like this and it went like this. It's far more threatening. It's $1.5 trillion. Campuses got bigger. No disrespect, but campuses got bigger, tuitions got bigger, and some of these endowments are like $30 and $40 billion, right? So, you know, we want an educated workforce, but we also, I think, need to start teaching people to love knowledge. I think knowledge and embracing knowledge is a lot different than getting a degree and going to college. I think they're two distinct different things. So I would say the biggest problem in this country, and it's going to be acute, is starting out every single person with the idea that they can handle the most rigorous education curriculum from day one so that they're not behind, so far behind that college, it should be a moot point, and it's really cruel to send some of them to college.
Bakari, on that point, we look at the education system in various places around the country today and increasingly controversial with school boards. And yet it's relatively unified, at least in Congress on the part of Democrats, that things like school vouchers and greater parental choice in terms of moving to different districts is controversial, is to be avoided. Isn't there a point that Charles makes there that if we are really trying to empower people, we should try and empower those parents who perhaps know best, and that individual choice versus the choice of centralized government authority?
No.
Why?
Well, there's a lot to debunk here. First of all, it's not a red state versus blue state type of issue. And Charles and I, you actually hit a topic that we diverged on the most. And I appreciate that, because if you look at the states that are struggling most, it's a really rich red meat talking point for a lot of my friends on the right, because they like to talk about Baltimore, they like to talk about New York, they like to talk about Washington, D.C., but the states that are performing the worst in terms of public education are Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama. And the last time I checked, those aren't progressive bastions. So, that point makes no sense. What happens is public education in this country is hyper-localized. It is. And we punish kids because of the zip code that they're born into. The reason why school choice may work in a major city. It may work. Howard Fuller is one of the architects of school choice. He actually emerged from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee with my dad. He's really good friends. He used Milwaukee as one of the catalysts for school choice, and it may work in an urban center. But if you're from Denmark, South Carolina, where I'm from, there are no good choices. So if every school in a rural area where they're all Black, 3-county area, 4 high schools, they're all failing, where do you want the kid to go? So what it breeds again is in 1954, at the Brown versus the Board of Education, you had white flight. What school choice will breed is half flight. So those individuals who have the means to leave will leave, and those who don't will stay. And what I would argue to you, Tom, is that your premise of your question, although I appreciate it, it doesn't fully understand how schools are actually funded. The schools are funded, and I think this is a unique educational tool. And the only reason I know this is because of my legislative background, but schools are funded on a 3-legged stool. They're funded because of, you have a strand that comes from local, you have a strand that comes from state, and you have a strand that comes from the federal government. But if you're in a poor community, you can't recruit businesses, you miss that local. And if you can't recruit businesses, you can't improve your schools. So I hear you, and I actually agree with Charles on one point that I think is the undergirding point that he makes. I do believe we live in a culture of low expectation.
To build on that, because
that was a ... That was a dramatic pause. Sometimes you get what you expect, right? And we have to do a better job in every community. And then this is my last point, Tom, because what I tell, this is give me like a 1 minute of personal privilege, and Charles can take his. During the Obama administration, there were 2 pictures that people remember most. One picture white folk remember, and everybody else. One picture Black folk remember. The one picture that everybody remembers is in the Situation Room. All right, it was during the killing of Osama bin Laden. The picture that most Black folk remember is the picture of Barack Obama with Jacob Philadelphia. Now, Jacob Philadelphia was 4 years old, and in the South, we had this saying called casket sharp, because when you die, Tom, that's the best you're gonna look. So, you casket sharp. But he was 4 years old. You could tell he was kind of getting a little disheveled because he's 4. And he gets an opportunity. His pants are creased black, spit shine shoes, has a white shirt. And he asks Barack Obama one question. He says, "Does your hair feel like mine?" And Barack Obama leans over, and Jacob Philadelphia reaches up and touches his head. That was an example of excellence. And where I agree with Charles Payne, and where I think his message needs to resonate more in our communities, is we have to teach people that they can be excellent. We have to tell them that if you want to be a doctor, I used to say be Benjamin Carson, be David Satcher, right? If you want to be a lawyer, be Thurgood Marshall. If you want to be a politician, be Nelson Mandela. If you want to be on TV, be Charles Payne.
Yeah.
So I think we have to teach that level of excellence.
And to Bakari's point, and I think there is as a conservative constituency and that perhaps is in favor of this. If we are talking about opportunity and the basic fact that in a lot of places, the county really is providing a substantial amount of the revenue that's going to schools, isn't one solution that perhaps conservatives should get behind is to say, maybe have more centralized pots so that the wealthy county doesn't get the better school inherently than the county that perhaps is less wealthy?
Can we bring up the question that we started out with up here? Because I want to apply what we just talked about to that question, and just tweak it a little bit, because I think that the question could be tweaked, and it's a good time to do it. But to your point, okay, so what is the best pathway to unlock opportunities for Americans to achieve their dreams? I think the first and foremost, is Americans have to have dreams before you can even unlock it. And the idea that someone may want to be a doctor has to start with the idea that they think they can be a doctor, and then they're being trained properly so that they can actually go after that. And, you know, listen, funding, rural versus urban, the reason I use progressive cities is because they're wealthy. They're wealthy cities, and these are where the opportunities are. And this is where you have the most pronounced educational achievement gap. And it's stunning. It's stunning how bad it is. Like I said, I was in a charter school in the South Bronx, and it's stunning how far black kids are in progressive cities run by liberals. They are not prepared for life. They can't have the dream to begin with, and if they do have the dream, they won't have the tools to go after it. So when I hear funding, yeah, funding plays a role, but it's the most important thing is, do you believe this kid is smart? But if you don't believe this kid is smart and you give them a watered down education from K, then you know what you have to do to make it up to them? Offer them higher minimum wage, offer them free public housing. You have to do all of that because they're not prepared. You didn't allow them to prepare themselves to do that on their own.
So before we did, and you can come back after this, but I want to ask both of you, would there be a compromise where, Bakari, you would say, okay, let's try school vouchers in big cities, and where, Charles, you would say, okay, let's have a more centralized pot?
The most important thing to me is curriculum. No, listen, if there's the poorest school and they can buy one book, make it the toughest book. Okay. If you don't have a computer, if you don't have anything else in that school, make it the hardest, toughest book and believe that these kids can do the job.
All right. I didn't get my answer there, though.
My answer to that question is yes, I'd take that gambit.
All right.
But the problem with Charles' sentiment is that it's cool because I went to Orange Wilkinson High School and like, yeah, okay, give us the toughest book. But in a 21st century global economy, I mean, Thomas Friedman said the world is flat. And I'm not like Kyrie Irving crazy, like you're not going to fall off the edge. But like the world is fundamentally flat. When you graduate from University of Maryland, you're no longer competing with a kid who graduates from University of Texas. You're now competing with kids who went to school where I don't even know where you graduated from, but it sounded pretty smart, right? You're now competing with kids who graduate around the world.
It's just my accent.
That's what it is. It's a sexy accent, though. I give you credit. So, like, due to interconnectivity, the world is fundamentally flat now, right? And then we're not preparing people. And so no matter what your book is, it is what it is. But you asked an interesting question about Joe Biden at the beginning, and you talked about taxing folk. And my question to my conservative friends is, all right, cool. You're compassionate. We talk about Judeo-Christian values. You care about people. Well, if you don't want free community college, which I don't know why you wouldn't want, because I think the people who, to Charles's point, aren't geared for college or don't want to go to college. I mean, community college gives you the skills necessary. Then one of the points that Build Back Better does is make universal pre-K for 3 and 4 year olds. Like, who's against that? And let's take a perfect example. If you ever turn to Fox News, not Fox Business, with all due respect, but Fox News, they say Chicago like 40 million times. Chicago. Like, I think people get paid for saying Chicago. Well, what happens with universal pre-K for 3 and 4 year olds is 300,000 3 and 4 year olds in the state of Illinois will actually get off on the right foot. So why not tax people and pay for that?
All right, so we'll move on from education after that, but your response to that, Charles?
It was a good idea. You don't have to.
Again, I just think that the whole thing is premised incorrectly, and it's the money, we spend more money per student than any. You just talked about the world.
That's true.
We spend more money than any country in the world. So you can't say somehow it's the money. We import 100,000 engineers from India every year to work in Silicon Valley, and I guarantee you 90% of them lived in places where Mississippi would look like the most important, like they would be shocked at how the amenities in Mississippi. So if we live in the global world and poor people around the world are kicking our ass, then it's not just money, it's something else, how we're making people feel from the very beginning of their life. And if we make people feel like victims, then they're gonna be victims.
So moving on to this idea of tax, right, which is the ultimate measure of, size of government, role of government in society. Bakari, one of the opportunities perhaps that countries in Europe, wealthy, have is the ability to benefit from American companies that are at the cutting edge of whether it's material sciences, technologies, computers, pharmaceuticals, as a good example. Is there a risk with the idea of the expansive government that we miss the point, or the left perhaps misses the point, that it's the smaller government where there's a lower tax imposed on these private entrepreneurs and businesses that actually creates all these things that make everyone in the world's life better? That you don't see that entrepreneurship around the rest of the world so much as you see it in the United States.
So let me just frame this properly, because I'm not a socialist, and I want people to make money, and I want people to make a lot of it, and I want people to be happy. But I also want people who are locked out of the system to be able to play the game. So that's where I come from, right? So let's just frame it. Now let's use an experiment. His name is Elon Musk. Elon Musk had a conniption this morning because of the billionaire tax, which didn't even make it to happy hour. It died a quick death. It's funny how Congress works. We had a billionaire tax last night about 10 p.m. It died probably around 11 a.m. this morning. That's what Congress does. But Elon Musk had a fit about a billionaire tax. What did Elon Musk not have a fit about? Subsidies on solar, subsidies on space travel, energy efficient vehicles, electric batteries. So, I mean, if government is subsidizing your dreams, if government is actually playing a role in the private sector and enhancing that capability, then I think, in the words of my good friend Joe Manchin, whenever somebody from South Carolina or the South says, my good friend, they usually don't mean that. That's like if somebody says, bless your heart, that's like, F you. Just so you know that if you meet somebody from South Carolina and they like, bless your heart, that means that they really don't like you. Okay, that's just why. So my good friend, Joe Manchin, stated it as a patriotic tax. And I think that, no, I don't want, I see a lot of my friends on the right more so. The South Carolina legislature, you find yourself kind of more towards the center than everything. I don't want tax regulation to be inhibiting. I don't want it to be a stranglehold, but I do think that we should have a tax rate in this country and a corporate tax rate in this country where people pay their fair share. There makes no sense. It makes no sense in the world. And I'm going to do a very sensationalized argument, which is probably reductive, and I apologize to Steamboat for this. But if you look at the growth of wealth of Bezos, of Musk, of Bill Gates, of Buffett, of all of those since 2009, Zuckerberg was worth $2 billion in 2009. Somebody Google his wealth right now and shout it out to me. In 2009, he was worth $2 billion. Today, he's worth, I don't know. And then look at how much the minimum wage was in 2009. And look at what the minimum wage is today. Anybody got Zuckerberg's wealth?
117 billion.
So I went to law school, and that means I can only count by thirds, which is my fee most times. So I don't know how much of a growth rate that is. But I also know that's a whole hell of a lot of money. But the minimum wage was $7.50 in 2009, and the minimum wage is $7.50 today. So y'all figure that out.
Just a 1 minute response, because I want to come to you, because you need a bit more time here. But on
He's
the minimum,
really good at this.
yeah.
So this is like what he does this every day.
But a pushback to that would be
Sure.
the minimum wage. Who are some of the biggest opponents? It's the small business owners. And one of the biggest arguments against it, which I think most economists would agree with, is that it prices out in the beginning those younger workers who are the least skilled.
First of all, I think that we're not prepared for AI, which is a whole nother discussion.
Mm-hmm.
That's first. Second, I think that you actually see, and I think that I'm in a facility that somebody could probably push back on me or agree, which they probably will agree, is that when you pay workers what they're worth, you actually increase productivity. I think there's a natural nexus between the two. Okay. And who's to say that you can't increase minimum wage gradually for businesses under a certain. So what if I were to tell you this? Let's legislate together. Let's meet in the middle. We raise the minimum wage for companies that have under 100 employees, right? Let's raise it for them, give them a living wage. For companies that have under 100, we raise it gradually. Let's fix that.
Okay, Charles, your response to those points?
You don't like the idea, but you get to ask a question.
Here's the thing. Wages, that whole $15 thing is now a moot point because the wages have gone up so dramatically. Anyway, it's really a moot point. It's always been sort of a moot point because the number of people in our country who work at minimum wage is de minimis. It really is. It's more of a political topic. Now, the last jobs report that came out from ADP, they break it down into 3 brackets: large, medium, and small businesses. Small is 1 to 49 workers. Then they break that down to very small and small. And what's happening with small businesses right now, which is really the ticket out for a lot of Black people, for a lot of Hispanics. I mean, that's your real ticket out to create a business, to be the next Elon Musk. I ain't hating on Elon Musk. I want to be the next Elon Musk. I want my kids to be the next Elon Musk. He's doing something to achieve that wealth, and it's benefiting somebody. It's not he's not pulling the money out of, somebody's buying his product and enjoying his product and his services. So this last ADP report was the smallest job growth I've ever seen for very small businesses. They cannot compete in this higher wage. You can make it, you don't even have to say, it's not about saying, hey, a very small business doesn't have to offer it. If Amazon's gonna say, I'll give you $20 an hour and pet insurance, then this small person whose business is near there just won't get the workers. So restaurants are going out of business. And it's not just small businesses right now. Red Robin reported their earnings. They apologized. It was a big earnings miss. The stock got hammered. We've seen that with a lot of businesses already. Even FedEx, a giant company like that, got hammered. But the small businesses, which are the heart, I mean, one thing I talk about is entrepreneurship. You want to control your own destiny. You don't want a boss. You want the American dream, go for it. The more taxes you put into society, the more unnecessary regulations you put in society, big businesses can deal with it. I heard a commercial today, I think it was from Facebook, a commercial saying we welcome regulations. Of course they do, because it puts a moat around their industry and small businesses will never navigate that. So the notion of higher wages, even if you say even if you say it doesn't apply to small businesses, it doesn't matter because they cannot compete with the companies that can pay it. Bakari.
We're not talking past each other. We're not disagreeing, but we may be talking past each other. Because what I'm talking about is something that people oftentimes in this discussion miss. You have economists and people who teach policy and all of these things and who come on TV with me all the time and they make the good argument. And I'm not, I'll be Elon Musk. I pay $2,400 a month in student loans. You think I don't want to be Elon Musk today? I'll be him. But what I'm talking about is why do people work 40 hours a week in this country and are still poor? Let's have a conversation about the working poor. So what I hate the framing of the fact that because I have a D beside my name, all of a sudden I don't believe in prosperity. Oh, I believe in prosperity. I believe in hard work. I mean, this country was built on the backs of people who look like me. So it's not, but all I'm saying, and I think that this is where Charles and I diverge because he has a different perspective from his lived experience, which is his truth. Right. But all I'm saying is simply that if you live in this country and work 40 hours a week, you should not be poor. And I don't understand why people would disagree with that.
There are certain things that people do. There are certain decisions people make in their life that have consequences. So if you drop out of high school and you think at some point, that now you're part of the working poor, and now the only way to rectify that is to punish someone with a punitive tax, and that will somehow level the playing field. Taxing Elon Musk for all of his money won't give the next morning someone without any skills won't wake up and magically be an engineer because we've taken all Elon Musk's money. The working poor person won't wake up the next day and magically be a top-notch construction worker but how about, getting some construction skills or getting some welding skills and things like that.
I mean,
punishing the rich doesn't solve the problem.
I'll let you come one quick. I just want to add something so you can expand it into your answer.
Respectfully.
Isn't there a point though that if we look at the US tax system, the top 10% of taxpayers, about 70% of all revenue. Isn't there an argument to say based on the math, they are paying their fair share?
More than their fair share.
I mean, I hear you, but if you think trickle down is rain, then I got some, I mean, like, look, trickle-down economics has never worked in this country. Reaganomics has never worked in this country. Anybody who tells you
No such thing as trickle-down economics.
well, we know because it never worked. I mean,
It's all trickle up.
I mean,
It's all trickle up.
Listen,
Bring out a new pair of Nikes tomorrow and go to Foot Locker, and people are running in there to give them their money, and it trickles up. There's never been such a thing as trickle down. All the wealth in this country trickles up, and then you can't complain when you've given the billionaire all your money that they've got all your money.
But I want to push back on these cultural red herrings that people have, because people say that if you didn't drop out of college, or if your father was in the home, right? Like
those things matter, though.
They matter, but it's BS for the conversation that we're having because of the simple fact that there are people who have done everything this country's asked them to do, and they still poor.
Are they outliers?
Let me ask you this. This country asked me to do it. Are they outliers? No.
All right.
So
that's the norm.
You go to college, right? You go to college, you do everything you're asked to do. I like this guy shaking his head. He's very emotive. So I hope he has a question in the third. No, I hope you have a question because you're decently emotive. So I was like, you want a coffee or like a sedative? You want a sedative or something? So like you do everything this country asks you to do, and let's say you have $2,400 worth of student loan debt, or you have this, or you have that. You're working extremely hard. All I'm asking for is that I'm not asking for this country to pick winners and losers. I'm not asking for that. I'm asking for a sense of equity, though. Like, I don't understand the difficulty. Bear with me. If you come from a certain part of this country, use Denmark, South Carolina randomly, which none of y'all are from, or no. Your water's not clean. You live in a food desert. We didn't expand Medicaid, so you don't have access to health care. And you live in a quarter of shame where your heating and air don't work. And so you want us to pull ourselves up by our own bootstrap. And we ain't got no damn boots.
You don't need boots. You don't need boots. Well, I had zero. I had zero.
But
no.
We're not talking about you and
my grandparents grew up lived in Uniontown, Alabama. And this is a black family that had a farm. And my grandfather would start businesses. A couple were burned down by the Klan. My grandmother never slept on a pillow. She slept with her arms crossed so she could hear the night riders, the Klan at night.
I know about them.
So she could never have a dead sleep. And they built something which was a foundation for their children who were able to build a foundation, for their children who were able to build a foundation. I just don't, this notion that we live in the greatest country in the world and this can'tism is always, well, these can't, they can't. I'm not saying everything is, we're all born with a silver spoon in our mouth, but there are so many ways to get from point A to point B. There's so many amazing, incredible success stories. And I'm not talking about getting rich. I'm just talking about getting to a place where you're at point A, point B, you've achieved something in life, and you've created a platform for your next generation to go a little bit higher, because that's really what it's all about. It's not about necessarily everyone trying to be a billionaire. And I think that where we are now, success, making success a bad thing. Or that somehow if you've done extraordinarily well, you should be guilty. I mean, my taxes are just too damn high. I'm gonna be honest with you. It's ridiculous how much I pay in taxes, and I ain't Elon Musk, and I'm not getting the services necessarily that I'm being taxed for. I think it is punitive, and I think the government gets my money and wastes it. And I would rather donate that money to a business, to the Harlem School of the Arts. I would rather help someone start a business with that money than that somehow the government take it and it vanishes.
I don't disagree with anything Charles said, but that also didn't answer my question about the kid who grows up that we were just talking about, because that's a very real experience. And so my only point is, I don't want to punish anybody. I'm not about being punitive. Like I said,
what's fair share? What is that number? You said you want, people to pay their fair share of taxes. What is that? I never even knew what that number. No one's ever said. Is there a mathematical formula for it?
I like what we're discussing now for the corporate tax. I mean, if that's the question,
No, I'm just on. You say, listen, if Elon Musk is not paying his fair share of taxes, what's the number?
Why do large scale companies pay zero in tax?
Some companies will have a loss and carry it forward. Well, yeah, I'm answering the question, but you won't let me.
Go ahead.
You said how does some company
pay a zero?
A company could experience a loss in 1 or 2 years and carry that loss over. Just, and then so the next year they do, right, just like anybody else. So that there are things like that, accounting
That's what I
things.
mean by fair share, because there's inherently,
But what happened when that company lost money and kept employees on, right? So they still tried to provide a service.
and all of this is not a
Right.
loss carry forward,
Right.
by the way. I just
Right.
want you to know that these companies
Right.
we're talking about, I mean, I carry forward losses from my private businesses, but that's not what
But you
everybody
take
else.
advantage of the tax code, which is what they do.
No, that's not.
All right.
I wish I could get to a zero.
So I think if we can bring up the prompt so that people know how to ask their questions.
He
and
should
then we'll
stand up
finish.
first and ask.
We'll do that in a sec.
Yeah, please let him stand
But
up first and ask.
Does everyone knows how to send in questions?
Yeah, I
Okay.
assume he's a professor or dean or something. I don't know. So stand up. Stand up first and ask your question. We don't even have a microphone. In fact, this is all supposed to be anonymous. So we would appreciate you standing up because you're red. You're flustered and red and emotive and everything. No. Question.
Okay,
Questions.
good. But let's go to the professor first.
Question.
According to the data, if you graduate high school, get a skill or trade, then get a job, then get married, and then have children, in that order, the poverty rate is near zero. If you don't graduate, if you don't get a skill or trade, if you do not get a job, if you do not get married, but nevertheless have children, poverty rates in excess of 50%. Why do big government programs, I mean, you dismissed the social issues, and yet the things that I just said most contribute to poverty are these decisions that we made about values. Why are you minimizing those? Why does big government help encourage more personal responsibility that leads you towards that first path?
So let me just answer your question directly. If you're 6'6" and you go to Mount Verde and you work extremely hard every single day on your jump shot, probably 500 jump shots a day, and you get recruited by Duke, North Carolina, or University of Maryland, and you choose one of those schools, and then you go to prep school, and then you go to one of these schools, and you stay healthy, and then you get drafted in the NBA, you can be a millionaire only if you do it in that order. The premise of your question was patently absurd. The reason I say that is because if we want to talk about cultural values, then what you do is you dig these very hard lines which do not allow us to have conversations like we're having today, where we meet people where they are. Yes, some people in my community grow up in a single parent home. But if you're going to talk about a single parent home and why aren't black men in the home, then talk about Ronald Reagan and how he took all these black men out the home with the war on drugs. Or talk about the fact that we look at crack cocaine in this country as a criminal justice issue, but we look at pharmaceutical drugs that white folk take and say, oh my God, that's public health. Right? So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the access to quality health care, or the fact that black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die during childbirth than white women. So let's talk about these systemic issues. Let's talk about where there's a Flint, Michigan, where black folk don't drink clean and healthy water. These do not happen. There are 100 cities in these United States which have less potable water than Flint, Michigan. 98 of those 100 are black and brown, the overwhelming majority, random side note, are Native American. So let's talk about these systemic issues. So if you're going to make an argument about cultural issues, if we're going to have a soapbox moment about why are you not in the home, how can you discount cultural issues, I'll give you credit for that. Black men need to step up. We need to do a better job of taking care of our children. I don't disagree with you on that. I will make that argument with you and agree with you. But I will also say that you have to go back in your own communities and figure out why we have these systemic issues and oppression which persecute people who look like me. And I think we can have a fair discussion about that.
Let me ask you though, whose job is it to fix that?
Which part? A lot. I was on a tangent too, so I don't know. I was kind of rhythmic with it, so you gotta.
The lack of enough fathers at home.
I think we have to fix that. But I mean, I don't listen. If I were to say that everything we did was right, if I were to say hip hop music is great, I listen to J. Cole, I listen to Jay-Z. Like, I admit the faults, right? Don't get me wrong. And what I try to do in discussions like this is meet people where they are. So I don't discount that. But what I'm saying is you have to acknowledge that systemic oppression.
Does big government make that? Does it exacerbate though that situation? Does it help at all? Like, if we tax Elon Musk more, would that help that situation? What can we do? Because you're a big government proponent. What can be done to help? Because where governments are biggest is where that situation is the worst.
I got you. How does big government help? What's the greatest ROI we could have right now? Infrastructure.
I think a great education system, but go ahead.
Infrastructure spending. Pass an infrastructure bill. Why is infrastructure good? Because we ain't drinking clean water. We have an aging infrastructure system, and we can't compete, right? Globally, infrastructure, rail, etc.
Is a pushback there, though, for the benefit of this audience, perhaps, that a lot of the social infrastructure that Democrats now talk of
I'm just
is
talking about-
expanding.
I'm talking about regular infrastructure.
Expanding stuff that is going to go toward.
I'm talking about roads and bridges. You asked about big government. I'm saying that's big government spending. I'm talking about roads and bridges. We're putting people to work.
Charles, should we be doing that?
I think we need infrastructure, real infrastructure, old school infrastructure. Yeah, I mean, our infrastructure has a D-
At
rating.
what budget level?
I'm not sure. You know, listen, remember the shovel-ready thing? Because this should be a moot point. We did get that. We got $1 trillion or $890 billion, and President Obama hired one of the big CEO from General Electric, Jack Welch, not Jack Welch, his predecessor, Jeff Immelt. And so we got the money for infrastructure. And where to go? So, listen, I obviously, no one's against not having better bridges, tunnels, and those things, but that doesn't get back to the social issue that was brought up here, in terms of the family structure.
So focusing on these audience questions, and please keep sending them in.
That was my fault. I apologize.
Charles.
I don't want she's going to yell at me after.
Charles, your decision to join the Air Force created a backbone for you to prosper. What stops other subsidy programs or government programs from doing the same for the underprivileged?
Well, first of all, I worked. I worked when I was in the Air Force, right? No one paid me to chill out at home. I didn't play video games, right? I worked, and it wasn't, show up at the center once a month or once a week and do something nebulous. And, I worked, I was in a police force. So I was prepared to protect my country. I worked on nuclear bases, and I took college courses while I was in there. So, and by the way, these college courses were essentially free, and none of my friends took them. And which to me was crazy, because as I would be heading out to class and they were grilling and drinking beer, when I got back from class, it took me about an hour to catch up. It's like, why don't you get your education? Because I'm going to get just as drunk as you later on tonight. And we're going to party together. But, so I've seen that's why some of this stuff is sort of like, yeah, you could say free college. And honestly, how many people will really take advantage of it? The fact of the matter is it's not a subsidy program. Protecting this country and keeping it free is not a subsidy program. And you work your ass off from basic training on.
I agree with that.
There would be an argument, though, to say, wouldn't there, that when we talk about the number of bases around the country, how many four-star officers with chefs and stuff, it's pretty socialist, even though conservatives like it at some level. Oh, the US military.
I don't think that's
The socialist?
The structure of benefits to the highest ranks in the
I would
military
disagree
is
with
slightly
you.
similar to perhaps the Soviet Union.
I would disagree with you wholeheartedly. I think you have to appreciate Charles's service, and I think it did.
No, I'm not talking about
I think-
Charles
I
as a
think-
young
I think-
enlisted man. I'm talking about four-star generals.
I think if we had a military that had 5 generals and everybody else were privates, then it would be more like the USSR or most socialist countries that either devolve into a dictatorship, because most of them do. Whether the African countries during their independence in the 60s and 70s, listen, you understood why they didn't want to embrace the economics of their colonial masters, right? I mean, I definitely would have said, maybe I'll try the communism, because these are the people that just had me in chains. But unfortunately, most of them devolved into dictatorships and set those countries back another 50, 100 years. But if I had to make an equation, it wouldn't be the US military where you have opportunity to actually achieve and build your way up. It would just be a handful of people getting everything and everybody else getting nothing. That's what your typical socialist nation is.
Bakari, a question for you. One argument for welfare is that it should be temporary to get people off their feet. How do you get people to move away from the aid when people are content with being content with government support?
I said this last night, it bears repeating. I've never met anybody on welfare who wants to stay there. I've never met anybody in public housing who wants to stay there. And I actually appreciate the interaction of people who ask questions sometimes, because I would like to ask the person, like, when was the last time they stayed in public housing?
I would say I have met
I wasn't
too many
talking to
people.
you, Charles,
But I'm being honest.
You know,
I've met too many people who are content to be in
Yeah,
public housing. When
I
I lived in Harlem, I was jealous of people who lived in public housing. They had elevators, and like, I mean, like we lived in a building with the, we had to climb over the wall.
Harlem is different now, and I
That's
don't know.
gentrified. You can't
it's
watch
different.
Superfly or something like that, Claudine or something like that.
But I would also say that's a bit of a red herring. I would push back on the notion that
you
people
don't know
are,
anybody who's here's the question. It's not that they're happy, but what are they doing to get off of it? One thing that bothers me is like I work early and work late, and sometimes my one building I worked in, I would come in and meet the security guard, and he was always watching videos. And I said to him one day, listen, you're here all night. Why don't you take some courses online? So maybe and he's the working poor. But he had a chance to take control and change his own life. So,
hey, have you seen Squid Games?
Just the first 2 episodes.
Oh, I won't. Okay. I was about to say something, but because you engaged in it, I won't.
Okay.
I won't say. There's a choice in Squid Games that isn't really a choice, but we could talk about that later.
So as an expansion, we talked about infrastructure a bit. A question here. Among various infrastructure programs, what do both of you think should be prioritized? And as a second point, do you think that infrastructure has to be run by the government? Charles, Bakari, you start.
I want to go back to kind of the first point about how you get off, because one, I don't think people really want to stay there, and two, I think if you pay people what they're worth, they'll actually go to work and do that. But that's an
arbitrary thing, right? Because some people think they're worth more than they are. The free markets typically figure that out, but I worry about overpaying someone. In other words, saying, hey, you know what? Because if I get paid more than I put in, if I just put in the very minimum and I get paid more, let's say at McDonald's, it might de-incentivize me to get better as a person.
Or the flip side of that is if you get paid $12 an hour, you're going to struggle and you're going to be working 40 hours and still be poor. But to answer your other question,
12, 15, it's still going to be in the same economic range. I'm just saying, if you overpay me,
let's get on to do a job, because I want to make sure the audience get their question.
Yeah, no, I think that when you look at, this is way more hot and intense than last night. I think we like each other a little bit more now. I think that infrastructure, yes, because and the question that was asked is a really good question, but it revolves around the way that infrastructure is truly funded and how it's funded. And infrastructure is funded through government programs. Very, very, very few of the dollars that create our infrastructure spending are centralized within states. So yes, it should be federally subsidized and federally spent, and that's how it is. I mean, it's been that way for a long period of time, which is why people sometimes wonder why is the DUI limit 0.08, right? And it's the reason it's 0.08 is because it was mandated to be that so that you could receive federal funding and federal dollars, and it's been unified across state lines and whatever. And it has to be centralized through the federal government. I think personally that the most bipartisan approach to revitalize the government, bring us forward into the 21st century, is to spend money on your roads and bridges. And I think you get the best ROI on two things. I think you get the best ROI on infrastructure spending and spending on early childhood education. And I think that
then let me jump in real quick, because I know he wants to ask a lot of questions. And I think it would be much more efficient if we did bid it out to the private sector. And if company A said, listen, if you build this highway and you set up a toll system, then you can collect the tolls.
It is bidded out.
But I mean, they could collect the tolls, not as a contractor, and say, and I think it would be built faster. I think it would be a lot more efficient. I think when things went wrong, they would be fixed quicker. So we would allow the private sector into that, I think it would be a lot more efficient, and we would have, like for me, every New York City, every year, the potholes are amazing. And I finally hit one. I had a Jaguar. I still have it, but I don't drive it that much because every winter when it thawed out, I hit one. I thought it was an improvised explosive device. It was so damn loud. I said, oh, what the hell? I went the next day and bought a truck. By the way, I got the Ram T-Rex two months ago. If anybody knows about trucks, if you're a truck lover, let me know, because that's the best truck out there. I digress. But the point is, I think those things will be fixed a lot faster if it was a private sector.
I think you can hybrid that. I don't disagree with that at all. I think that even with the best federal programs, you should, of course, allow for that type of innovation to do things faster, quicker, with more innovation.
Charles, there is a shortage or businesses are facing a shortage of workers in terms of they're unable to recruit people to come and work for them. What's the cause of that? How do you fix it?
The way they just can't compete in this environment. You know, we had 3 major economic programs, emergency fiscal programs since COVID, and $5 trillion, $5.3 trillion, of which $900 billion went straight into paychecks. This last one in April, you know, it was, you know, you got $2,800 for a couple, another $1,400 for each kid. Then you had the new child credit in there. And then, of course, the enhanced unemployment, which if you work certain places, it was up to $1,000 between the $300-400 plus the state. So people socked away a lot of cash. And now, of course, when they are ready to go back to work, if Amazon's offering $18 an hour in pet insurance, you know, I have these business owners on my show all the time. And some of them are reduced to tears because people walk into the restaurants and they want to support them and they just don't have the staff. And I'm not sure, honestly, I'm really afraid because entrepreneurship, you know, I want young people to say, I want to go into business. And for the most part, we're setting amazing records right now in entrepreneurship. It really is mind-boggling. But you want to make sure that when you do go in business, you can hire staff. And I've been in places where the owner of the restaurant has actually apologized. Just out of left field. I had a woman in this place and the service was so bad. She just came over and says, I can't find the right workers.
I have an answer, but this question has been eating me up. Is pet insurance a real thing?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I didn't even know. I missed that one. That's wild. Charles was right, but one of the things that was left out is that of that $5 trillion, a substantial portion of that also went to businesses in this country, and necessary. I mean, the spending. There's a question about how much, but I think we all agree that this.
With the stipulation, though, a lot of it that you had to keep the workers on.
Well,
and that became a tough part.
That became a tough part, but a lot of that was forgiven and waived. They weren't even loans. I know people took out PPP loans and EDL loans, and it became. But to answer your question directly, and I don't mean this flippantly, but I would say that if your workers are staying home for $300, then you should pay them more.
It's not 300. It's 300 plus 700 plus 2,800 plus 1,400
but it's
for
a
each
300.
kid.
But
it's about $48,000 that they stay home for.
They're not staying.
All right. So another question here.
I mean, ask any small business owner. This is not even political. It's economics 101. They can't afford these workers.
The USA needs to respect every job. If the trash collectors stop working, what will we do? How will we handle it? The society needs every level of employee, and they need those employees, whatever their level, to be respected. So gentlemen, how do we get there? How do we build that respect so that people are not looked down on regardless of what
I think that's a great question. So Martin Luther King, of course, died
I
during
love
the
this
Memphis
story.
sanitation strike. And 2
60.
weeks before the mountaintop speech, he gave another speech about the dignity of work.
It was also a very pro-union speech, but
Yeah, it was. It was about a union that was paying different wages, and the black workers worked at night and had the dangerous shifts and didn't get overtime pay. But his speech about the dignity of work, we have snubbed our nose in this country at the dignity of work, at certain people, certain jobs. Certain people look down on sanitation workers. Certain people look down on people who work with their hands. And it's really amazing to me because we're ceding those amazing jobs mostly to immigrants who come here. You know, I know New Jersey. In my own home, I bought a house in January. And, you know, so one day I looked out, we were getting the one room, knocked the wall down, making a library. We had the people with the grass, the people with the pool, the woman who's been doing clean our house for like 20 years. And I looked around, I said, everybody here was born outside of this country, most from south of the border. And they all worked hard. They were doing an amazing job. And then even with construction, right? The construction workers, and we're making a big mistake not being proud of the people in this country who work with their hands, not showing them the kind of respect I think they deserve. So I do agree with that there's a dignity of work, of earning that everyone should feel and that we should share, that we should also make them feel.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you asked, and I knew Charles was going to go to that point because I was going to go to the same point that many people forgot why King was killed and when he was killed. Not only was he there protesting with sanitation workers for their right to unionize and fair wages, what actually happened was there were two sanitation workers on a very rainy night that had to work a late shift, and they were killed by a trash compactor. And that's when he went to April 4th of 1968. 68 was a terrible year in this country in terms of race relations. It was, Tom Brokaw said, boom, because the country is falling apart. You had the Orange Massacre in February. You had April 4th was King. In June, you had the assassination of Kennedy. And you had many soldiers black soldiers coming home from a war still being treated like second-class citizens. But to answer your question, I think that there is a Sherrod Brown talks about it all the time, the United States Senator from Ohio, about the dignity of work. And what that dignity includes is not only appreciation, but it means allowing people, clean, healthy, safe environments where they can work and prosper.
All right, so that's about all our questions. So we're going to get to closing statements. Charles.
Well, first and foremost, thank you all very, very much. I really appreciate that you came out for this. I think it's an important conversation. I think our country is at something of a crossroads where we're going to have to make a decision. I do believe that this nation pulled itself up by the bootstraps, metaphorically, boots or not. And I think that's a unique thing. How did this country, this upstart nation, so young, become the preeminent country in the world in such a fast period of time? And we did a lot of it before there was anything as social programs, even before there was anything as such as an income tax. And how much of it can we do? How much of it can we control? I just believe we should try to control our own destiny. And I think everybody here is blessed to be able to be here and to be able to pursue that path. I want to thank Bakari, obviously the Steamboat Institute, thank you. But I just hope we keep the conversation going. Thank you all very much.
I would do this with Charles any day of the week. Like I said, I didn't know Charles before a pre-call that we did, and getting to know him over the past 36 hours.
I wasn't trying to, on the pre-call, I'm not good with this Zoom thing. So I wasn't on there, but I wasn't trying to act like a prima donna. They're like, damn, everybody else is on there, but Charles, what's up?
No, I thought you were.
I was trying to hit the video thing. Like, what the hell?
I was like, either Charles is a prima donna or he too old to know what Zoom is. No. I do appreciate Charles, man, because, having this platform and being able to go out and speak your truth every day is something that you can't take for granted.
That's true.
So I appreciate Charles for always speaking his truth, which is what I try to do. And I have to say, what's up to Steamboat? Because there aren't many platforms that allow us the opportunity to come and exchange ideas on this high level at an institution that prides itself on exchanging ideas. And I hope that the conversation was challenging and uncomfortable. I mean, those are the way these conversations should be. I'm somebody, like I said at the beginning, I don't believe that anything about this country is irredeemable.
Well, gentlemen,
I will not finish yet, Tom. You just keep,
sorry.
I mean, you're about like the producer in my ear when I'm on Don Lemon every
Sorry.
night. They're like, we're going to commercial. I'm like, I got to
That
get
ain't the
this
producer, that's Don Lemon.
That is Don telling me I need to let him get more talk. Anyway, I do believe it's not what this country was or what it is, but what it can be. And I look forward to just the prosperity that we can all have together. And I'm excited about that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay, sorry. Well, a fantastic debate there. I've learned an important lesson, which is always to listen to people and not to wear a big wool jacket next time because I'm boiling. But we have the question up here, which is shifting. So I hope everyone has a last vote. And on that note, Jennifer, would you like to come up and make some concluding?
Interesting where we started. Where we started was 68-32. Exactly where we started. So wasn't any. So for those of you maybe who didn't hear me, we're right where we started. This was the pre-debate poll was also 68-32. So it looks like maybe we didn't change any minds, but I think we would all agree this was still a robust discussion. The purpose is maybe we didn't change your mind, but maybe you now understand Bakari's point of view better. Maybe you now understand Charles's point of view a little better. So when you go have these conversations, with your friends and colleagues and family members. You know, when you go home at Thanksgiving, try to have civilized debate and discussion like these two gentlemen did here tonight. You can have these conversations with anyone. You just have to unlock your critical thinking skills. We now see a slight little movement there, but still very, very close. I want to say thank you again to the Ed Snyder Center, Ashrie, to the University of Maryland for having us here. Always a very professional operation when we come here. We want to encourage you to watch this debate, share it. It's going to be on Steamboat Institute's YouTube channel and at steamboatinstitute.org. Please get your friends to watch this debate. I want to say thank you again to all of our sponsors. One of them came all the way from Colorado, Irene Johnson, who sponsors our programs too. So thank you again to all of you for coming, and we look forward to being back in Maryland next year. Thanks again.